Now we are. Buttons. All right, let's try that again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. We forgot to go live, so now hopefully you are seeing us. Yeah, getting rusty after a month being off. You get rusty. You don't know which buttons to click, so it happens. But thanks again for joining us, folks, for another session of this. I'm Luis, one of your hosts, and with me today are my co-hosts Bree and Jake. And today we also have David and Benedikt joining us. Talk a little bit about FSharp.Stats and the project, and hopefully folks can learn a little bit more about that. With that being said, folks, would you like to introduce yourself? David, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hello, and thank you for having us. My name is David, and I'm from Kaiserslautern. I work here in the Computational Systems Biology group, and in my free time, and also while at work, I'm a developer in the FSharp.Stats package and also a maintainer.
Yeah, so I'm Benedikt. I'm also a PhD student, just as David, in the Computational Systems Biology here in Germany. And I'm one of the core maintainers of FSharp.Stats, and I'm going to present to you today some features.
Awesome, great. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. But before we talk about FSharp.Stats, let's take a look at what's been going on in the community and releases and anything related to that. So let me switch it up here. Whoops. That's probably better. All right, so you can take a look at the community link. Scrolling on the bottom there, and that's going to include all the links that we're going to be going over today here. Let's start off with ML.NET. So version 1.5.4 was released a few days ago. And you can take a look at this video here from our friend John Wood, who walks through the different changes and new things that came with this release. If you were to take a look at the release notes, there's certainly new features that came with this release. One of them was a new API for exporting models to ONNX. For folks who may not be familiar with ONNX, it is the Open Neural Network Exchange, and it's a way to essentially provide interoperability. So let's say that you were to train a model in something like PyTorch. You can then convert your model to ONNX and export that, and then use that inside of ML.NET, and vice versa. You can train a model with ML.NET, export it to ONNX, and you can then use it from any other sort of framework that supports ONNX. And what this change entails is giving you the ability to specify the output columns that you want to export and you want to work with. So when you're working with ONNX models, at least the default used to be where it would export the entire model. Now, you may not care about all the output columns. Perhaps you only care about one specific column or two. And in this case, now you're going to be able to specify that column, which, again, some of the things that gives you is your model will now be smaller. And hopefully, because it's smaller, it will perform better in many cases. There were a few enhancements. One of them was there was an update to the ONNX runtime. Right, and there was also an update to TensorFlow.net, among other things. So, if you have some time or anything, you can go ahead and check this out and let us know whether, if you run into issues, feel free to raise them on the repository here in the .NET Machine Learning repo. Now, related to TensorFlow.net and releases, version 0.3.0 of Keras, TensorFlow.Keras, was released along with TensorFlow 0.32. Now, there aren't any release notes. You can certainly, I guess, take a look at the different commits that occurred to kind of get a sense of what was new. There is something that I know for sure this release fixed, which is before there were some examples. One of the examples, particularly with image classification and transfer learning, was broken in the previous version, and as of version 0.3.0, you are now able to do transfer learning using this Keras.net package. So yeah, make sure to try it out. And again, same thing. If there's issues, feel free to raise them there, and hopefully we can have Haiping come on, the maintainer of this package, TensorFlow.net, and the entire SciSharp stack, to give us a little bit of a demo and what's new with these packages. All right. So moving on, if you are new to machine learning or ML.NET in general, there is this guide here, or this article that was written by Daniel Costea. If you remember, he was on in our previous episode talking about his project. which he submitted and was one of the top projects for the machine learning hackathon, ML.NET, virtual ML.NET hackathon. And in this case, he just kind of talks about, what machine learning is and ML.NET and how you can do machine learning using .NET. All right, so feel free to take a look at that. There's other parts. This is part one, and when the other parts come out, we'll also be sharing those as well. Similarly, for folks who are looking to get a collection of what types of projects are out there in terms of ML.NET, the different data sets and different projects that you can work on, there's this page, Machine Learning for Developers, which gathers into this one place. You'll see here, there are some videos from John Wood, as well as videos from other fellow community members that basically put together all the different resources that may be out there for ML.NET and machine learning that you can then follow at your own sort of leisure. All right. For our Spanish-speaking audience, there is this article here, which is predicting the value of an action using time series. Right. So it's really nice to see here that for folks who may not be in our English-speaking audience, they can also take advantage of ML.NET and can actually take a look at these guides. I believe that this is related to stock prices, so it's very applicable, and definitely something worth checking out if you're looking to learn how to work with time series and you're from our Spanish-speaking audience. You can definitely take a look at this. Let's see. We have this other tutorial here that's a little bit more advanced. I believe that this is using, if I'm not, there it is, right? So it's using the image classification API to try and classify Legos and identify their colors. Now this uses TensorFlow, right, which is what the image classification API for ML.NET is based upon. And it uses transfer learning to try and apply or train a deep learning model with less data than you typically would use and less resources that you typically would use if you were, say, to train your own model using some lower level components like TensorFlow or Keras. But at the same time, it gives you that sort of advantage where you can train with less data and less resources, but you can still have a custom model built for you here. So in this case, again, it's just trying to identify whether the pieces are black, blue, green, or yellow, and it's using ML.NET to do that and deep learning and transfer learning. If you're looking for text classification type problems, there's this other article here, which talks about classifying articles. And I believe what it's doing is doing some sort of clustering. Yeah, using a pipeline to extract features. It's using, in this case, it's not using the sort of catch-all transform in ML.NET, which is featureized text. Featureized text actually under the hood, what it does is it basically applies some of these more common types of transforms. But in this case, the authors seem to wanted to do it individually to perhaps have better control of this. And then they use the k-means trainer to then go ahead and try to build clusters of similar articles. So definitely check that out for text classification scenarios. Here we have how to build a recommendation engine using ML.NET. And in this one, Ricardo kind of walks through how you might want to use the Snap co-purchasing network data set to try to find similar items to recommend to users. All right. And in this other article, similar to the Lego example, where it's using, this was from Gregor, who also was in the last machine learning community stand-up, talking about his project, again, that he submitted to the ML.NET hackathon. In this case, it's applicable to the holidays and trying to save yourself and training a deep learning model to try to identify Krampus so that you can, I guess, save yourself and not try to run into Krampus or get an alert if Krampus is around, so that you don't run into Krampus. But yeah, so this is a really cool project. Again, it's using that same image classification project, and he even built some custom tools and to basically tag and annotate the data that he extracted and built his own data set, and he leveraged the safe stack to do that. Additionally, we have this other video here from Faisal, who talks about working with ML.NET and FSharp Interactive. FSharp Interactive, if you're not familiar, is just a way to basically work with FSharp that basically kind of gives you a REPL or an interactive way that you can go ahead and train, well, not only train models, but you can essentially perform a lot of computing tasks and basically be able to edit your code on the fly, and you're able to get that instant feedback so that you're able to edit and iterate on your code. So if you're interested in how you might use ML.NET with FSharp Interactive, this is a really great video and resource that you can check out.
Yep. Link I want to talk about, or maybe you can pull up the our samples repo. I just wanted to add that after the hackathon, all the hackathon projects are now part of the community samples. So we'll add that to the URL list as well, if we can. If not, we can always add it for next week. So if you go down, scroll down, you'll see that there's an option for community samples down there. It's past all those samples near the bottom. Yeah, so right there. So that's the link we'll send out and add to the new link. So you can see all of the ones from the hackathon are now added. So if you wanted to try out any of those projects, you could clone this, and yeah, they'll be right there.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you to everyone who participated in the hackathon. We got some really awesome projects.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So with that, and one thing that I'll point out, a lot of this content and just December in general was a very busy month. You're going to see that there were a lot of FSharp projects here. And part of that is because there was a lot of submissions that came into the FSharp advent calendar. So if you're not familiar with that, not F3, 2020. This is a project, and there's actually a variety of them, right? It's been going on for a few years. There's a C#, there's a Q# one as well, and I think other communities have theirs as well. But in this case, Sergey kind of just puts together a schedule, right? For, well, this is for 20, is it? I think this is 2020. Anyway, you're going to see here that there's multiple years. In this case, 2020, you can see that there's other stuff that's not necessarily related to machine learning specifically. It's just in general, the FSharp community contributing and showing different ways of doing things with FSharp and contributing back to the community. And in this case, there were tons of machine learning related projects that were submitted. So again, thank you folks from the FSharp community who are interested and you made these submissions. And you know, tried out and showed folks how you might want to do machine learning using FSharp. So last but not least, today we're going to talk about the FSharp.Stats project, which you can check out here. The FSharp.Stats project is under the FS Lab organization here. There's actually a few projects under it, but we actually have some guests here who are going to talk to us about that. So let me turn it over to you folks. David, do you want to share, or do we go to Benedikt first?
No, I can start.
Okay, perfect. Let's switch it up.
Okay, cool. So can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. So thanks again for having us. It's really an honor to be here, and also a warm hello to everybody in the comment section. So since we're here and invited to talk about FSharp.Stats, but also machine learning in general, we thought instead of jumping right into the repository, we maybe take a different route and kind of show you an origin story of FSharp.Stats, which also includes how machine learning and data science is applied by us to tasks in the life science field. And yeah, so instead of going to FSharp.Stats, what I want to introduce you first is the field of data evaluation in the scope of biology. And maybe this will help people to cope with their problems in their own specific domain, or even inspire to see some similarities in their everyday work and how this might contribute to a contribution into FSharp.Stats by the community, which I would really, and I think I speak for Benedikt also, love to see. Yeah, so our background is that we study biological systems, for example, like this plant here. Yeah, okay, that's the point. Like this plant. I mean, people do this for centuries, mainly, but not by studying the whole system, or mainly by just studying parts of it. And by that, they shed light like on the plant metabolism and features like photosynthesis. They found out that those simply theming plants are very complex systems, and those complex systems have a complex regulatory system, and this can be observed by proxy when observing biomolecules in their abundances. For example, biomolecules is like a protein, which everybody knows, or lipids, or metabolites such as sugars. And while in the past it was super cumbersome to study that, this kind of stuff. For example, one PhD was measuring one so-called biomolecule like sugar for his whole PhD. But today we have the means and the good fortune to look at thousands of biomolecules at the same time. How does this come? So this is, of course, due to technological advance, mainly due to the advance in omics technologies. So omics technologies are high throughput technologies that enable us to measure thousands of biomolecules at the same time. And everybody feels or gets a hold of this right now, because while we talk, everybody sees in the news the COVID pandemic. And while this is not only, this is also has devastating effects, but what we also see is the immense speed of which humanity is able to tackle this pandemic. And this is to huge part attributable to almost omics technologies and what they allow us to do, because they allow us to do to perform big data analytics in the domain of biology. And of course, this cannot be done by hand, so it has to be done by using computational assistance. And this, therefore, there's a demand for people like us, for the computational biologists. So what we do is we develop algorithms or write programs, scripts, and build platforms to process the data, statistically analyze the findings, and to distribute the data again. So in our group alone, what we did is we identified three main pillars. So the raw data processing, which you see here, which starts with sparse signals and ends with the quantification, for example, of a biomolecule. Then we have the data analytics, which starts with the biomolecule and then relates them to each other, for example, by point-wise comparisons and statistics and traditional data science. And we also have the part where we distribute our findings to non-computer scientists. And all those pillars are really heterogeneous, but also have a lot of shared functionality. And of course, all pillars rely on computational support and machine learning. So the question is how to cope with all those fields. And what we identified is that in a small team, for example, from 10 to 20 people, switching between the languages can significantly slow down development and communication, of course. So now what we do and how we overcome this is we use FSharp as a general purpose language. It's our general purpose language, our workhorse. And this is, of course, mainly due to the great features of the language, like the strong scripting environment, which allows super fast development cycles, the type safety, and of course the interoperability with the .NET world. For example, we have great libraries like ML.NET or Plotly.NET, Deedle, Math and Numerics, and so on, Flips, DiffSharp, as we saw in the talk here before. But of course, we also have a really strong backend front-end environment given by the Safe Stack. And this allows us really to compete in all those pillars. So due to the functional nature of FSharp, luckily, if you did everything right, your code is organized as functions. And looking across all those pillars I just showed you, allowed us, besides our everyday work, to build FSharp.Stats, and we would really like to see people joining us, basically. And so after we reordered all the functions we wrote over the years, and we created the package FSharp.Stats. And what I am now going to do is I'm going to show you two problems related to data processing and data analytics, where you see how such a project works and how functionality can finally lead, for example, to FSharp.Stats, and how we can also use FSharp.Stats to perform data science. Yeah, we hope that the community can benefit from this and inspire people to contribute. Okay, so what you see here is a very simplified scheme of how protein quantification can work. And what we see, or a functional programmer maybe you might see, that this fits very well into the MapReduce pattern. So we start with some measurements, perform processing, perform statistical analysis, do this for independent replicates, and then integrate this and have quantified proteins and hopefully new findings. So machine learning techniques are actually used at every single step right now. So we wrote a whole pipeline in F#, and we make heavily use of ML.NET, for example, and I can tell you that it feels amazing and it integrates amazingly in our pipeline and integrates also very well with FSharp.Stats in our so one example would be to use
quick question there. So with the data that you're working with, it sounds like it's a large quantity of data. Typically, what's the size of the data sets that you're working with?
It strongly depends on the question the researcher asks, but I mean, okay, so roughly, if you do at least 3 replicates, one, in this case, it's a mass spectrometry run. One run can last from 1 hour to 4 hours to 5 hours and so on. A 1.5 hour run can sum up to 10 gigabytes of data. If it's not, I mean, even more, like 20 gigabytes of data, depends on the accuracy you're measuring it with. And if you do not use compression methods. If you compress it, you can get it down to 1 gigabyte. But 3 measurements would be very low. We're more speaking here in hundreds for one question asked. So the amount of data is exploding.
Gotcha. And you also mentioned MapReduce, and it's we're using a similar technique there. At any point here, are you parallelizing those computations, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, and you'll probably discuss this later?
No, we do that. We in the moment we parallelize, mainly the whole pipeline. So we parallelize on a file level, and this is also a language feature for F#, which makes it super easy. I mean, I also do this on the level of convolution. So really in the deep down in the code. But I have to say that it's really easy to maintainable if you do it on a file level. It's also very nice because what we now do is we go to Docker, for example, and this also allows scaling in a very, very nice manner.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So in this case, what we could do is to use machine learning techniques, for example, the regression fast tree approach is to compute a hyperscore out of features that we assign to those spectra. And then later on, this is how we do it, perform statistics on those hyperscores. So this is how it can work. But of course, this is not really where the machine learning process often starts, but sometimes the hard work is to obtain single features that can really, obtain the features actually. And this is what I wanted to show you here. For example, what I already said is that what we want to do is we want to quantify a biomolecule, but what we have is this sparse measurement. So luckily, what we can do is in silico to simulate spectra and then compare simulated spectra for which we know which biomolecule might produce that spectrum to the measured one. And of course, when you do the comparison, what you need is a measure of similarity, for example. And one that is frequently used is the sequest score here. And what we see here is that the sequest score computes the cross correlation between the spectra and normalize this by the average autocorrelation of the spectrum. And for us, what we saw this, and what we did is we after the project, we transported refactored those functions out of the specialized code that you just saw into FSharp.Stats. And what you see here on the right is the actually code, how it ended up being in the library. And what you really see here is the clean syntax of FSharp, how we can use function as parameters, and by that reuse this function down here to enable the user to have direct access to the most commonly used function in that field, but also to just supply another similarity measure up here and really benefit from this. Okay, so so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one project of the second pillar and how we applied FSharp.Stats there.
So we have a question here from the chat from Mona 1984. It says, how are you estimating the size processed? Do you provide, where's batch size? So do you process the data in batches, and how do you provide that?
Okay, so we have I've pretty much of course you have in beforehand you have to access the metadata of the files that you're actually going to get, and by that you get a hold of the number of spectra, and then you can interpolate of how much memory you will need in the end. So how much space you will need in the end.
Gotcha. So you're using the metadata in the file to kind of inform your decision.
This is correct. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Let's get back into it. So what we did here is, now I want to show you how we can reuse the function that we just did, or how we used it in a different project. And in this project, what we did is we studied one of the most well-known and most liked model organisms, which is yeast. And the goal of this project was to identify patterns that follow a circadian rhythm, so that repeat themselves. So not only do we as humans have clocks, also organisms have clocks. We can think of it like that. And what we did here is first you quantify, of course, those measures, process them, and then you have to do replicate statistics. And then you see here two different traces. In this case, it's one trace is oxygen, and the other trace would be a metabolite as a proxy for the oxygen consumption in the cell, or the availability of the oxygen. And now I can show you how you can expect to reproduce this part to FSharp.Stats. So in this case, what is interesting is that you see by eye, now you want to quantify it, by eye you see that those functions seem to share a common rhythm, but you have to quantify it in any way. This is not simply done by correlating those functions, because you see the shape is different. And then this would negatively bias the correlation. Yeah? And one thing you could do is you can compute the autocorrelation of each trace and then compare the autocorrelation in means of wavelength and so on, because as you see, the signal is repeating itself. And this is how the whole process from here on actually looks like in FSharp code. And I hope you join me in seeing that this code is super clean. It practically documents itself, and you see how we the calling and actually calculations are done here. And as you see here, we can define simple functions doing simple tasks. In this case, what we use here is we apply the FSharp.Stats mean function, for example. And here, what you see here is where we apply the autocorrelation function that we just implemented 3 minutes ago. And we applied it not only once, but repeatedly. Essentially, for every entry, we compute the autocorrelation at a different lag. Yeah? And this is how the result then looks like. So when we see at the result here, we now cleaned the data from the effect of having different shapes. And C can now measure the wavelength and do statistics on where the peaks of the autocorrelation actually are located. Okay. And yeah, repeating this actually, many projects resulted in FSharp.Stats, and of course also working directly on FSharp.Stats resulted in FSharp.Stats. And now it's, yeah, Benedikt will show you the repository and also the documentation we can provide.
So before we move to that, I noticed that there's a lot of plots there. Is that something that's built into the FSharp.Stats, or what are you using for plotting all these graphs and charts?
Oh, cool. Yeah, here for the plots, especially this one, we use plotly.net. Yeah, which is
Great.
developed by a colleague of us. Yeah. But Henny will show you how to use it, actually.
Excellent. So switch over. Okay.
Yes. So as David introduced to you, FSharp.Stats is a library for numerical calculations. And now I'm going to introduce to you, so I give you a guide through the repository. So this is the GitHub homepage from FSharp.Stats. And just recently, a few weeks ago, we migrated the whole project from our CS biology group to the FS Lab community to get more input. And I think it's a great step to move it to FS Lab. As you can see, it's almost exclusively written in F#. And down here, you already can see some core functionalities covered in FSharp.Stats with direct links to the documentation. And now, when we go to the documentation, thanks to the FS Lab community, since yesterday, it was ported to the new FS Lab doc style. And now we have interactive notebooks attached to every single documentation so that you can try these code snippets on your own without downloading and installing all this stuff. You can just do it in the browser. And
we before we move forward a little bit, we have a question here from one of our audience members, Gregor. He's asking, were you inspired by bioconductor, tidyverse, tidy models while working on this project? And second question is, where do you see F# and .NET's strong points in comparison to Python, Perl, R in bioinformatics?
Yeah, so bioconductor, I think, is a strong resource, and of course, there are shared functionalities of FSharp.Stats and all these things. But as David already mentioned, we tried to combine all our efforts in one language, and we chose F# to do this with a strong .NET framework to do all those pillars, all these three pillars from data gathering to the analysis until to the exchange with the actual experimenter, which is also mostly based in the .NET framework. Yeah, and David, do you want to say something? I think no. Okay. Okay. I thought. Okay.
And one last, could you zoom in just a little bit? It's a little bit hard to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Is it better now?
I think maybe a little bit more. The code is a little bit. Yep. I think that should be okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah. Okay. So as it's the name FSharp.Stats supposed, so we do a little bit of statistical testing as well, of course. And here we have, of course, the t-test, ANOVA, post-hoc test, and multiple testing corrections. And what we try to do is to give a little bit background information in each documentation so that beginners as well as experts can relate somehow to the topic we want to cover here. And so that everyone who wants to start with FSharp.Stats and using this can understand what is happening in these snippets. So go try it on your own. So actually we are on it on the 1.0 release. And so I think the documentation is extended on the way. So we try to extend this. So now I want to show you a little example live here. So here I've created, is it big enough? Okay, so I've created an FSX file, so it's an F# script file, and reference FSharp.Stats. So referencing libraries and packages is as easy as you can see here. And after referencing it, I've created 2 collections. So the first collection here is a vector from 1 to 10, which is bound to the name xdata. And the second one are also 10 values bound to ydata. You can see the result down here in the interactive. And now what FSharp.Stats is doing is to extend the sequence module of FSharp core for several functionalities we often use in our daily work. So here, for example, if we want to calculate the median of xdata, we simply type sequence.median and we get the median, or we can calculate the standard deviation of ydata. It's 8.23. If you now want to do some...
Now, just to clarify here, so sequence here, it's something that's built into FSharp. It's not something that is being provided by FSharp.Stats.
Yes, absolutely. So FSharp.Stats just extends the functionalities you can get from this sequence module. Yeah, right. Thanks.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So if you now want to do some correlation measurements, you can open FSharp.Stats correlation, and then another set of functionalities is added to this sequence module. So now you can call the sec.Pearson and calculate the Pearson correlation coefficient of xdata and ydata, which is 0.67. But you can also, if you want to perform some clustering, you also have to do some distance measurements, and then you can, in a classic way, navigate through the FSharp.Stats library and to distance metrics, and for example, calculate the city block distance of xdata and ydata. So, and as FSharp.Stats, we want to do some statistics as well. So there we can go into the testing module and perform a t-test, more specific, a 2-sample t-test on this xdata and ydata. And now you will see it will complain, because in this case here, the 2-sample function requires an additional parameter, which defines if we assume the variances of the 2 samples to be equal, which in this case, I would say is not the case. So we give it a false, and the result will be a test statistic where we can read the t-statistic value, the degrees of freedom, and the p-value of the statistical test in this case. So this would indicate that these samples above here are not really similar. Okay, and if you want, Luis, I can show a little example for data processing with FSharp.Stats, if it's fine to you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so here again, since the FSharp 5 release, this is a nice feature. So we have interactive notebooks, which is quite nice. So here are referenced the awesome Deedle data manipulation library, FSharp.Stats, obviously, and plotly.net. Which is a great FSharp-based visualization library maintained by 2 of our CS biology members. And the project I'm going to show you basically is inspired by some groups of our university are interested in the reaction of green algae to elevated water temperatures. And so one day we thought, okay, now we should really look which temperature fluctuations each day occur in the nature. And so we have this nice little pool here or pond here right next to our building. So actually this building in the background is the building I'm sitting in currently. And then I set up an Arduino-based temperature logging device with 6 temperature sensors in different layers of the pond, a rain sensor and a light sensor. And I did this for 1.5 years, I think. And now if we read the data, so we import the data with Deedle, you can see the data frame down here with a timestamp and 6 temperature readings from the different temperature sensors, the light intensity value, and the rain amount which falls during this time period. Okay. So now with this little function, I can isolate the values, the temperature values of specific sensors and plot them using plotly.net. And here you can see the result. So I've chosen 2 temperature sensors, the one at the very top, the very surface, and one more deep in the pond. And what you can already see is here that the fluctuations of this surface sensor are much higher than these deeper in the pond. So in summer 2019, we had an amplitude shift of almost 10 degrees, I think. And for the sensor down in the pond, the change was almost 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. So
quick question there related to the sensors. And so you said that you're using an Arduino and a few different types of sensors. Are you doing any .NET development to interact or interface with the Arduino, or is it all in sort of the C-like Arduino language?
Yes, back then when I started this project, I started just with an Arduino. I started in this group, but actually I think the NetDuino is a very nice project, and I thought to buy one, but the shipping time was, I think, 2 months or so, so it was not applicable for this project. But it would perfectly possible to use in NetDuino. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. Another thing you can see here, quite interesting, is if the lake was frozen in winter, then you can see that the temperature down in the pond ranged from 2 to 4 degrees, as you would expect it actually. But I also had a few problems we have to fix in a minute. So here, especially in the beginning phase, I had a few blackouts of my temperature logger and power bank setup. So this is a problem for many signal processing methods, especially this one I'm going to show you. So therefore, we have to pad these gaps with artificial data points somehow. And therefore, we can use the padding module in FSharp.Stats to pad these gaps with artificial data points. So here you have to define a whole range of parameters, but all of them are in detail explained in the documentation. So in this line here, the padding happens with padding.pad. And after that, we can again visualize it with plotly.net. And now you can see the blue signal is the raw signal, and the gray signal is the padded data, which includes, of course, the raw data. And then we padded 15,000 points to the right, to the left of the signal, and these gaps in the middle are filled in with random samples from the data. And now what we use it for, or what we can do with this, is to isolate or search for reoccurring patterns, so for frequencies happening in this temperature time courses. Of course, you would expect the temperature to cycle once a year and once a day. So this you can do with this transform I'm going to show you. And actually, this padding here originally derived from another project I did with cell identification in live cell microscopy videos. So from this project, the padding module went into FSharp.Stats, and here I could reuse it. So now, if you search for frequencies in a signal, you often perform a Fourier transform. But the problem with a Fourier transform is that you only see the frequency that's happening, and you don't see when this frequency occurs. And to overcome this problem, I present to you the continuous wavelet transform, which tell you both the frequency and when the frequency happens. And this is actually this came actually from a proteomics pipeline David talked about. So this is a proteomics code that was generalized, put into FSharp.Stats, and is reused in this project here. So actually, all this stuff down here is the visualization and the styling of the plot. The transform itself are just these 4 lines of code, so continuous wavelet transform, and then we need the padded data itself, of course, then a distance function, the number of points we've padded the data with at the borders, and a so-called wavelet. And wavelet just defines the range of frequencies we want to investigate. So in this case, I chose from 12 hours to 370 days or something like this. And if we then plot the data, this is the end result. So on the top pane, you again see the temperature reading of this surface sensor. And down here, you see the signal of the correlation values of the frequencies defined here on the right. So whenever there is a strong color, so red or blue, then there was a response for the frequency here on the right. And it is nice that we can recover this the seasonality, which is visible here at 350 days approximately. And we also see high correlation signal here at around 1 day, which is basically nice to have, but we know it already. So what you can also see here is that in wintertime, when the lake was frozen, there obviously was no frequency that is visible in all this month when the lake was frozen. And what becomes visible here is that time periods from 2 to 4 weeks. So we have sometimes we have a strong signal for these time courses. For example, here is a negative correlation, and here is a positive correlation at 15.3 days, which could indicate that there was a high pressure or low pressure area within this time period. I think it's a very great analysis if you search for patterns or frequencies and want to know when these frequencies occur. And while it was a fun project for me, actually, it resulted in a study from another group of our university. So they study the metagenome, so again, an omics technology of this pond. So they try to identify the different organisms living in the pond in specific times of the year. Yeah, so basically, this is it. In the end, maybe it's a short outlook. Of course, you can do it not just with 2 dimensions, but only multi-dimensional. So you convert your Rigger, so your wavelet function, from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and then you can search in microscopy pictures for cells or other signals you are searching for. Yeah. So this was it, what I want to show.
Very cool. So I noticed that in the chat, there's kind of some discussion around units of measure. And for folks who may not be familiar with units of measure, it's essentially this function, or it's part of the F# language that allows you to mix different units, right? And express values, numerical values, as different units. Does FSharp.Stats use units of measure at all? Because in this case here, you're looking at days. You're also looking at different sensor measurements, right, which may be in completely different scales and things like that. So are units of measure used at all in FSharp.Stats? And if so, how?
Yeah,
David?
Yeah, so right now, we do not use units of measure in FSharp.Stats, mainly because of performance considerations we made when designing it. But we use it when, what Benedikt showed would allow the use of units of measure. This is where the strength of unit of measure can be played out, but in FSharp.Stats, we always also do performance considerations, and units of measure is more a top level type of thing where you can apply it very nicely. Yeah, but still, of course, everything is compatible with the units of measure because you can add it later on.
Yeah, so
if the performance considerations allow it.
In this specific case, I designed the function that it can take different. So different. I have to search for it. So here, so it can take floats, dates, ins, whatever you want. You just have to define here a distance function that converts all which expresses the distance between the data, so the data type you want to analyze. So in this case, this A is a date time, so we're just measuring the difference in the two different dates. In normal cases, it would be float. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, and I think that this is not, specific to FSharp.Stats. I think in general with machine learning, computers can't really understand any other form of values other than numbers, right? So in this case, you're working with a lot of numbers, but does FSharp.Stats allow for working with different data types, or does it only allow for working with numbers?
So I think most of the calculations we perform are based on floats, but whenever possible or necessary, we try to be as generic as necessary to allow other data types as well. So we always try to generalize our workflows so that you can paste in any data type you like, if applicable.
So we use also code from the FSharp Power Pack in the matrix definitions, and there you see that we also have a matrix defined that uses a generic type. So we can extend it in a way. So if anyone is interested, and feel free to contribute. This, yeah. So like you shared today.
So in this case, you kind of showed some of the t-testing capabilities. You also showed off some of the signal processing capabilities. And as I understand it, there's also some fitting that you can do with FSharp.Stats. What sort of problems or machine learning functionality can you sort of leverage with FSharp.Stats?
Yes, so I think from fitting we have several methods. So from linear regression over nonlinear regression to a cubic spline interpolation and smoothing splines. So if you want, I can show you a few examples later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I can start.
Absolutely. We can go over that. And in the meantime, while you're pulling that up, we have a question here from Gregor. Do you also handle categorical values like for offsets in linear regressions?
I think it was Freddy.
Actually, I don't think so that we can handle categorical data at the moment. Maybe you correct me, Dave.
No, this is practically it. Yeah, you have to do the conversion beforehand. So you can, you can do the conversion to one hot encoding, and I think you're good to go. But you have to do it by yourself right now. But yeah, this would be actually a very nice contribution. Okay. We should open an issue right away. Or a feature request. Yeah.
So here the example. So now I want to interpolate the two samples I defined at the very beginning. So therefore I can go in the interpolation module, and actually I want to do a polynomial interpolation. So I first have to determine the coefficient of the polynomial fit itself, polynomial function. And therefore I just take the x data, and then hopefully, no, of course you need the y data as well. So now you should get a vector of the polynomial interpolating the signal. And now to get the fitting function of this interpolating polynomial, you can again go into the interpolation module, polynomial, and apply the fit function, which requires the coefficient and the x value. But here I do it a partial application, so I just handing the coefficients over to the fitting function. So what I get is a float-to-float function. So this fit I is a function I can apply on several x values. In this case, I can maybe apply this function to every value from 0 to 10 with a step width of 0.1. And then map over this list. So basically, for every element in the list, I perform now this function. I want the x value itself, and then I apply this fit I on the same x value. And then with plotly.net, I think I don't have reference plotly.net here, so I quickly add it here. So it's really easy to reference other libraries. So now I should be able to generate a line plot, and that you can see the original data. I also will generate a raw data chart. So with chart.point, I can hand over x data and y data. And here I can define the name interpolating chart. And then I can combine those two charts, so the raw chart and the interpolating chart, to one single with chart combine and chart show to depict this whole in the browser. And now HTML should open, yes, and there you can see the interpolation of the data within polynomial.
Very cool. So just to clarify what went on there, right? So when you got the coefficient, and then that fit I, that's your model, if you will, right? Because it's a function that you pass new data into, and it will fit it using the transform there, the polynomial transform that you fit on your original data to produce an output, or your y hat, or whatever you want to call it, your prediction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And so if you want to do a regression, it basically is exactly the same. So here we can call regression coefficient of the regression. So now you can go into fitting. I think linear regression, ordinary least squares is the method we want to use. And if we want to do polynomial fit, we again go to coefficients, but now we have to define the order of the polynomial we try. So in this case, I would recommend 3 x data, y data, and then it's the same. Let fit R. Like above in the interpolation, we have fit with the coef of R. Oh no. Also to define the order here. And then if I exchange fit I with fit R, we should see the regression polynomial of this sample. Yeah. Okay. And we can do the same with splines or cubic spline interpolation.
Gotcha. Very, very cool. Yeah, this is super interesting. I just want to do a quick time check. We have about 1 minute left. So with that, this is really great. Again, thanks for showing off all the things that you can, or a lot of things that you can do with FSharp.Stats. Are there any parting thoughts that you would like to leave listeners with?
Yes, I think as we now are team, are we members from FS Lab? Come and look at FSharp.Stats and all our other repositories, and we are open for contributions. So if you like something to contribute, just ask us. We are open for ideas, And also, if you want to start but don't know how, don't hesitate. Just come and ask.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, thanks again, folks, for tuning in again. Thank you both for joining us and showing off this really great library. And we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye, folks.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.